Buongiorno a tutte e tutti, benvenuti a Univac On Air. La ragione per la quale ci sentiamo oggi è che abbiamo qua all'Aquila con noi il professor Michael Tye dell'Università del Texas a Austin, che è venuto a fare una conferenza sul problema della coscienza. Che cos'è la coscienza? Sono soltanto gli esseri umani ad avere la coscienza o anche gli altri animali hanno la coscienza? E infine le macchine, i computer, i famosi large language models con i quali parliamo tutti i giorni, anche loro sono coscienti? Possiamo dire qualcosa del genere di loro? Michael Tye ha studiato a Oxford fisica e filosofia, poi si è spostato a New York per finire il suo dottorato in filosofia e infine, dopo aver insegnato in diverse università sia in Inghilterra che negli Stati Uniti, appunto è finito in Texas. Welcome to the University of L'Aquila, Professor Tye.
Thank you.
You did a very interesting conference this morning on consciousness and the limits to which we can attribute consciousness to various entities and various animals. Your main idea seems to be that in order to attribute a consciousness to any entity, there has to be some sort of kind of behavior and some kind of representation, internal representation of what is going on into the world or into the entity itself. Can you tell us a little bit more on these two elements?
So, if we ask ourselves the question of how to study consciousness first in the animal world, it's very difficult if we try to rely upon neurophysiological evidence, because animals vary greatly in terms of their neurophysiology, and we don't really have any reason for preferring one neurophysiology outside, say, the domain of mammals to another. So I think the best way to proceed is on the basis of how the animals behave. In our own case, with human beings, we attribute feelings and experiences to one another by looking at how others behave and then using that as a kind of indicator of what is going on inside. But the way in which people behave is not a guarantee of what they're feeling on the inside. It's simply evidence for how they're feeling. So we need to take into account other considerations, in particular, whether certain kinds of cognitive states are present in the human beings that we're discussing or the other animals. We need to sort of figure out whether it's reasonable to attribute various beliefs to them, various desires to them, and then using the combination of that and their behavior, I think we're in a position to attribute experiences. So in the case of animals, I think a case can be made that consciousness goes not only beyond the realm of mammals to birds and fish, but even arguably to honeybees. When we turn to machines, I think essentially the same methodology is appropriate. We need to look at how the machine is behaving and whether it's reasonable to suppose that the machine on the inside is undergoing states, as Simone said, which represent the world in various ways. So it's a complicated business trying to decide whether a machine is present. If you take the case of large language models, we don't have the relevant behavior. We've just got linguistic output for linguistic input. But if we embed one of these models inside a robot and we extend its capacity to process inputs so it can take not only linguistic inputs, but also visual inputs, for example, of the sort that we undergo in perception, inputs about state of, say, an associated body, and so on. In short, something like sensory inputs of the way that of the sort that we undergo. And then we look at the robot behavior, and if it's like our behavior, and if it's responding to inputs similar to us, and if we have reason to think that the robot on the inside is also representing things outside in various ways, then under certain conditions we may be entitled to attribute experiences and feelings to the robot.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think that many people today in the conference, attending the conference, were struck by your example on the trade-off on pain. For you made the example of being landed a very hot dish with
Yeah.
food full of food
Yeah.
and resisting the pain.
Yeah.
And you said that there are now experiments that showing that also animals show this kind of behavior. Is that right?
Yes, that is. So there are experiments, for example, with fish. If you allow the fish to go into a certain part of the aquarium, and when they go there, you shock them, then they stay away. You give them an electrical shock,
Yeah,
they stay
okay.
away from that part of the aquarium. But after a while, they get hungry. And so if you put food in that part of the aquarium, you find what they do is they go in there, they put up with the shock to get the food. So they're trading off there, again, the desire to avoid the shock.
Yeah.
And presumably because it's producing in them something noxious as in us, something that feels bad, with their desire for food. So that's one reason to think that fish may be subject to pain. But there are many other examples of fish behavior that support the idea that they feel pain. So here's one of them.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Snedden she anesthetized some trout, and she injected their lips with, I think it was acetic acid or vinegar, bee venom, something nasty like that. And in the third case, I think it was just water, something just without any obvious effect. And then the fish came to, and after they came to, and they were swimming around again, they were rubbing their lips against the sides of the aquarium, and they were also sitting on the bottom, on the gravel at the bottom, and rocking from side to side, which is a behavior in primates which supports the view that the primates have undergone some unpleasant experience. So again, the thought here is, look, you've got the sort of behavior that we would engage in if someone were to inject vinegar into our lips. We try and rub them, and then we'd be acting in ways that make it obvious we've been feeling uncomfortable. We find the same behavior in the fish. That doesn't prove that they're feeling pain, but it is initial evidence. We want to see also, well, what is it that, as it were, the fish kind of believe is going on, what kind of concepts are operative there, and then come to the conclusion.
Yeah, this is interesting because to consider a contrasting philosopher, you mentioned Descartes, the famous French philosopher, who thought that animals were just organic machines.
Yes.
But now we have been used after Darwin to think of this kind of reaction as a natural expression of something, for instance, an internal state.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be, in a way, surprising that pain is something that is quite represented along the animal kingdom, isn't it?
No, that sounds right to me. And there are experiments really that go down even into the realm of insects which support the view. So to take an extreme example, and I think sort of a one that's not really clear, take the case of fruit flies. If you put fruit flies in a glass tube and you put food at the other end of the tube, they will fly from the end they're at to the end with the food and then eat it. In the second case, the food is there as before in the glass tube, but the middle of the tube is heated.
Okay.
Now the fruit flies will not fly through the middle of the tube to get at the food. They will stay away. If, however, you then feed the fruit flies with an analgesic, that is, it's an analgesic for rats on a hot plate. That is, you give this substance to rats on a hot plate, they'll stay longer on the plate than if they hadn't had the substance. You give this to the fruit flies, then they will fly through the heated region to get at the food. So, it sort of suggests that beforehand they don't go because they, at some sense, realize that this is going to be bad, so they don't do it. But afterwards, as they get closer to it, they don't really feel anything, so they go through and get the food. There are other experiments in which they're presented with various odors, and immediately afterwards they're given a shock. They're electrically shocked. And what happens is that once this sort of training has happened, odor, shock, if you present them with the odor again, within 24 hours of the training period, they won't go near the odor. They stay away because they've associated the odor presumably with something that feels bad, namely getting shocked. Strangely, if you reverse the order, you shock them first, and then you present them with the odor afterwards. If after the training you present them with the odor, they do go towards it because they take it as an indicator that the bad stuff has gone. So it's a kind of pain relief learning. And there are other cases in which they've amputated limbs of fruit flies and found out that their behavior in certain contexts is rather like the behavior of humans who've had their limbs amputated. With humans, if you have a limb amputated, understandably, you're more careful. So if you're in situations which are threatening or which would normally potentially cause you pain, if you had a limb amputated, you're very careful in those situations. You stay away and so on. And with fruit flies that have had limbs amputated, you get a counterpart to this. For example, if the room that they're in is heated, after the amputation, they will leave the room at a lower temperature. And the hypothesis is that there are neurons within the fruit fly whose standard behavior is to inhibit pain. And because of damage to the nerve, those neurons don't get active. So they feel pain at a lower level of stimulation than before. And that's why they leave the room at a lower temperature.
I see.
So, I mean, none of these are conclusive, but they are suggestive again, because at least you've got a pattern of behavior like the pattern of behavior we produce in response to pain. And you've got to ask the question, well, why are they doing this? And the obvious natural answer is, well, because something is going on that feels bad to them, something they want to stop, they want to cease. And so that's why they behave as they do. Now, if you've got another explanation which is as good, fine, but I don't think it's easy to come up with one.
No, and I think that here comes the concept of representation, because what you're suggesting here, you're giving us a number of examples and experiments of animals as different as a rat and a fruit fly. So, one is a mammal, the other is an insect, an insect, that are both sensitive to the very same kind of anesthetic. So this is also interesting from a biochemical point of view, of course. But here the representation comes because within a variety of different kind of animals and behavior, you seem to have something that is common to them all. And that would be, I guess, the concept of where the concept of representation kicks in.
I think initially, it looks as if the fruit flies, like the fish and like us, they want whatever's going on to cease. It seems natural to describe them in that way, even if perhaps the form that their desire takes is simpler than us. And because they want it to cease, well, why? Well, because they're feeling something bad. It's the obvious explanation. Why not take that at face value? It seems to me the burden then lies with people who take the opposing view and insist, no, there's nothing like it feeling going on there. Okay, well, fine, give me a different explanation then of these various experiments. These things are complicated because, for example, in the case of sharks, they've been found with a large number of stingray barbs in their mouths. And stingray barbs, they inflict a lot of pain. So you think, well, how could the shark be feeling pain if they're prepared to do this to get food or whatever? They seem...
Notwithstanding.
So it looks like, well, maybe sharks really are just killing machines incapable of feeling pain. But apparently with sharks in captivity, if you shock them, they do not like it. They're aversive to electric shocks. So there's a kind of puzzle here. One explanation is that in sharks, the desire to eat is so strong that they're a bit like the guy in battle in a wartime setting who has been shot in the arm
Yeah.
and who ignores it because he's so focused on just surviving.
Yeah.
In the case of shock, maybe this sort of killing machine picture, they've got this intensely strong desire to eat. And so they then simply ignore the pain that they're feeling. That's why they put up with the barbs. But then the electric shock in captivity, in those cases, you know, it's not the same setting, so the pain gets them to remove themselves. So that is what I'm inclined to believe, but as you can see, it's not entirely simple.
Yeah, I wonder whether you're suggesting a screenplay for Jaws 3 or something like that. Let me move now to LLMs. Many people, those that are saying, no, these machines are just probabilistic computational systems and so on. Frequently, they kind of recur to this idea. Machines are not in touch with the real world out there. That is, they just compute into themselves what are the relative probabilities of any word coming out after that word and blah, blah, blah. And so they cannot really be attributed anything like a belief and desire less than a conscious state. But you resisted this line of thinking.
Well, I mean, you're right that quite a few people think of large language models as operating basically in the same way as autocomplete on your phone when you start to type a word and it finishes it for you. In that case, your phone has simply been built to pick the statistically most likely completion of the word that you've started. If the large language model is just doing that, then I think it's no more intelligent and no more conscious than autocomplete on your phone. But in some cases, there is at least some evidence that large language models, in fact, are generating internal states which are unlike anything that occurs with autocomplete on the phone. These are states which seem to represent some of the information that is presented in the inputs, the text inputs that are provided to the model. I mean, the inputs themselves, they have meaning, and it looks as if the large language models, in some cases, have somehow picked up the meaning of the inputs and are using that to generate the outputs. If that's the case, then what you've got there is something that's right at the beginning of intelligence, because when we behave intelligently, it's because we have certain internal representations of the world, and those influence how we behave. So if any of these networks are doing anything like that, then they're on the way to beginning intelligence. But I think to get full-blooded intelligence, and for that matter consciousness, you need to both expand the range of outputs that the net has been built to respond to, so that they're not just text inputs, but inputs, for example, in the form of images, or inputs about states of the artificial skin in an associated body, and outputs that enable not just speech, but behavior of various sorts of the robot body. Now imagine this whole network being placed in the body, and you've got something like an artificial brain in a body which is a counterpart to a human body, and you think if the thing gets rigged up in the right sort of way, then there's no reason to say, in principle, that the thing can't be intelligent or it can't be conscious. I mean, once we allow that in the animal world, no specific neurophysiology is needed for the presence of intelligence or consciousness, then the fact that these systems are physically very different from us doesn't preclude from our attributing to them conscious states and states of intelligence. But, you know, we're not there yet, but I think we're closer to that than many people realize.
Yeah, I think so. You tend to agree with Geoffrey Hinton that was saying, let's be quite cautious on this machine.
Yeah, so he had an example of a problem he had given to ChatGPT-4. It involved painting of rooms. I won't. It's fairly simple, but I don't think there's much point
Yeah.
in going through it here. And I guess he was playing around with ChatGPT-4, and he was shocked when ChatGPT-4 came up with its answer to this problem in less than a second. And the thought that Hinton had, which I don't think is proven by this, was this isn't statistical. This is not just somehow picking the most likely continuation of the input, whatever that would be if you're sort of setting the thing a complex problem. He thought that that was a reason to suppose that these things are already getting intelligent.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the things that they can now do, I mean, they can solve theoretical problems in physics at the PhD level. They can do highly complex crossword puzzles. They can behave in ways that suggest that they're trying to deceive people in various contexts. You put all things together, I think it at least puts serious pressure on the view that they're always just behaving statistically.
Yeah. Let me ask you, do you think that now philosophy, in a way, is out of its ivory tower and more into society? Because it seems that now philosophers are being asked around by computer scientists or even neuroscientists. I mean, David Chalmers and Christopher Koch had a toast that giving right to David Chalmers, the philosopher, that after 30 years there won't be any good theory of consciousness. He was right, and Christopher Koch, the neuroscientist, told him, yes, you were right.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, there is a new role for philosophy in the science in general.
Well, it's interesting that various hitherto purely theoretical thought experiments have become more or less real. And that's the extraordinary thing, that these fantastic examples that philosophers have considered now are part of the real world. Actually, in the arts, if you look at movies, there's a movie from several years ago called Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, in which he basically falls in love with a computer program, and that's now being echoed in the real world. I mean, there are people who are signed up on social AI sites who seem pretty clearly to have managed to fall in love with their AIs. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that philosophy and the arts and the real world have all come together here in a certain sort of way. But it's also interesting that notwithstanding this and notwithstanding the progress that is being made, there is still absolutely no agreement as to the nature of experience and feeling itself and how it fits into reality as a whole. We can make judgments about whether in certain circumstances experiences and feelings are present. You know, are they there in fish? Are they there in certain sorts of robots? Is it restricted to human beings? We can form reasoned views there, but there is certainly no agreement as to what it is there, what consciousness itself is, which we're attributing to these different systems.
Yeah. I used to think that, I mean, in the history of science, we witnesses various revolutions, you know, Copernican revolution, then the revolution made by Darwin, or the steam revolution. But it seems that this kind of revolution is hitting human beings somehow differently, because it's just inside us somehow. Do you think it's going to have...
I think it's very like those revolutions. You know, think about the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the steam age, the vast changes that those made.
Yeah.
I think this is going to do the same, and it's very hard for us stuck in it to see where it's going to end up. You know, there are very different views here. So you have Elon Musk saying, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, sure.
So these robots can do everything for us. We just sit back and relax. And then you've got another view, which is that huge numbers of jobs are going to be taken away. Regular level management in companies is going to get largely done by these robots. So what's left for people to do? They're supposed to just sit there and read books and be happy, Elon Musk style, or get freaked out because they don't have the power that they once had to control the world and their environments. And as these systems get more and more intelligent, then we are no longer going to be the rulers of the planet, unfortunately. So on that view of looking at things, our future is actually very uncertain. And I mean, you have the head of Anthropic. I guess he was also talking to, when I saw him, Demis Hassabis, who was the head of DeepMind at Google, which is now part of Google, and they were discussing sort of general intelligence of the sort that we have being here in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's close.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And there's just no reason why these models, which are restricted to language, shouldn't take all sorts of different inputs.
Yeah.
And once you get that, then you've got systems which in principle can accept all the kinds of inputs our bodies accept. Light for the eyes, sound for the ears, so on. Got all that. You've got, you know, I mentioned earlier that in China in the last couple of weeks, there was a half marathon race for robots.
Yeah.
And it's on YouTube, I think. And the robots, some of them were kind of falling over as they were running, but some of them were running way better than any human and at a faster rate. And they managed to complete the whole half marathon. So you take one of those, you embed one of these multimodal networks in the brain of that thing so it can do more than just follow this course. And by the way, it was directing itself on the course. It's not that there were others who were telling it where to go around bends and so forth, right? So yeah, I mean, the only question seems to be when all this is going to happen. There's a good side to it because after all, presumably these systems, some of them will be able to come up with all kinds of cures for diseases, drugs, and so on. And Hassabis already won, if I remember correctly, a Nobel.
A Nobel Prize, it was
for stuff connected.
The folding of the protein, and it was good
indeed,
for. And people tend to think, oh, machine will never be creative as we are.
Yeah, that's just, I think, false.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a last resort. You know, we stay there in the
They're already creative. I gave an example this morning of that really impossibly difficult crossword puzzle, which OpenAI's latest machine did an extremely good job at. It did get stuck at one point, but I don't know of any human who's managed to do that without getting stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and there is, as I mentioned, there are cases of theoretical physics problems at the level of the PhD, which these machines can now solve.
Okay.
And in the States, I think people who in the past did computer science undergraduate degrees and then who ended up going into sort of software and coding, there just aren't jobs for these people now because the machines can do it as well or better. So computer science departments at universities in the States, they're having to kind of reconstruct what exactly they cover in those courses.
And one other worry is that whether this machine will be fair to us. It's very difficult to say. I mean, whether they will be just the reflection of what we are, and so what we teach them, or if they're autonomous, they may develop their own ethics or their own way of looking at us, or whether they should respect their creators or not, or something like that. That is, as the result of our artificial religion. No, we are the gods.
I think that's a serious concern. I mean, it is the case that at least some of these companies are sensitive to it and trying to do things to control what goes on. Because now, for example, AIs can make completely realistic videos. There's one you may have seen in which Tom Cruise is fighting Brad Pitt. I think this was generated by Chinese AI. But it's totally realistic. I mean, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are there fighting, but it didn't really happen, of course. So there's no question that you can get completely realistic videos made. So now imagine that someone says to a machine, I want you to make a video of some terrorists blowing up a school bus with children on it. You're going to get a completely realistic video of that and worse things. Now, the companies are sensitive to this. So they try and put in guardrails so that the machine will not respond to certain sorts of requests. But the problem is that you can make these requests in all sorts of ways. And you can sort of suggest it and make it indirect. And so it's a really serious, difficult job to figure out how to preclude that kind of thing. So imagine that someone gets inputs of that sort into the machine and does so not just with video but with text and so on, then who knows what the ultimate output, ultimate result of that will be. So I think there are serious worries there.
Yeah.
And there is an agreement between these companies. I mean, they're just trying to make money.
Yeah, right. Because when you were mentioning this, I mean, I was thinking it's some sort of a Socratic duty. We have to teach them properly.
Yeah.
Behave.
Right, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And also look at some of the cases now in which to explain their unexpected behavior, when they're prompted, they're given a different text input, namely, why did you do that? They make up some story to explain why they behaved as they did. And the way in which they do that, again, it's worrying, because it's the sort of thing that a child or whatever who's misbehaved might make up to explain or justify the behavior that they engaged in. So I think this is crazy stuff.
Yeah. Interesting times to live in.
Yeah.
I mean, Okay, I think we can thank you very much for your patience and your interesting talks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. Grazie a tutti.